People sitting right here, especially because this one right here texted me and said, hey, I don't know, maybe if you want to come and I don't know, speak at the school board. And now they hate me and I'm like cool with it. So let's start off with why are you guys a thing? I think that's really interesting how you started.
All right, well, we started the Rutherford County Library Alliance in July of 2023, and that was as a direct result of Murfreesboro passing their since repealed unconstitutional decency ordinance, which made homosexuality illegal on city property in Murfreesboro. And we saw instant attacks on our public library system and the books in it, particularly towards our queer youth. And that was with children's and young adult books. They talked heavily about extending that to adult books as well, have not yet. But we, my husband and I, went to the next library board meeting after the decency ordinance passed to see what the effects of that could be on our library, and saw the attacks that were beginning already, the efforts by certain board members to accelerate those attacks, and tried to figure out what group was going to be fighting it. Because there's always a group fighting it, right? There's always somebody doing it. There wasn't. And so we started an online petition, started the Library Alliance, met Carrie and Frank at the August, met Carrie at the August library board meeting, met Frank, and fought full-time, non-stop, pretty much ever since then. And I'll pass along for some other people to talk to.
My name's Angela Frederick, and I am a school librarian. And so for the past 5 years or so, my job has become increasingly difficult dealing with challenges to materials, trying to support librarians across Middle Tennessee and the state who are dealing with, as in the case of Rutherford County schools, hundreds of removed books, Wilson County, hundreds of removed books, and then in other counties, things are being removed, as we say quiet censorship or soft censorship. So people are taking books out, but the public doesn't necessarily know about it. And so it's been a rough few years to be a school librarian or a librarian in general. And so I became aware of RCLA and the work they were doing, and I showed up to speak at a county commission meeting. The county commission was speaking to the director of the Rutherford County Library System at a meeting. They basically berated her in public, and it was at that point that I became radicalized, I guess. And I was like, okay, I have to be involved. So since then, I've given public comment at school board meetings, county commission, and just tried to let other people in Rutherford County know what's going on. I don't know that the average person is necessarily aware of how much their rights are being trampled on by elected officials. So I've gone down to the Capitol and spoken to our senators and our representatives, local, our state senators and representatives, and just, trying to keep getting the word out about censorship and how it affects students and everyone really.
Okay, I'm Carrie, and obviously as Tiffany said, I met her in August of 2023. And I think the real turning point for us as a group was in November of 2023. The county commission had a meeting, and they were saying things that were just flat out lies, saying the ALA wants us to ban all these books. They have a list that they want banned. And what they didn't understand was the ALA keeps track of what books have been banned to inform people, and that they did not promote them being banned. And they kept missaying things, and I maybe went a little crazy and put my hand up And when they said, does anyone have any comment or question about what's being talked about? So I put my hand in the air, and I knew that they wouldn't call on me, but an hour later, when I still had my hand in the air because I'm not normal, they actually gave me 3 minutes to talk. And I had nothing prepared. I was just very angry and upset. So I went up there, and if you know me, you know I can lose my mind and be very loud and vocal.
Not you.
So I went up there and I pretty much lost my mind. And that video ended up going like mini viral, whatever. Aaron in the morning picked it up, and a lot of people heard about it, and it went, like, I had family and friends in Canada waking up going, oh, I just saw you quoted, never in the history of the world have people banning books been the good guys. Great quote and that. I'm like, how did you hear about that? It was like a little county commission meeting. So once we got that, things just started going, and then Tiffany was able to create an official nonprofit status for our group, and we've had people join in where you talk, like I said, like they've said, at the school board meetings, the public library board meetings, which, while I'm saying that right now, March 17th, there is a public library board meeting at the courthouse in Murfreesboro at 5 p.m. They want to remove all materials that promote or discuss gender confusion, as they call it. So basically, every single book in our public library that mentions anything about LGBTQ+ is at risk of being removed. This is also the public library that wanted to ban the anti-racist kid. Now, they said it wasn't because they're racist, of course. They weren't banning it because of the color of people's skin or where they came from, but there was a word in there, trans. And that's why they wanted to remove a book teaching people to accept people's differences. So we're really just doing what we can. We want to get the word out. And if you can show up to any of these meetings, we encourage you to wear purple. The reason for purple is this is not a Democrat issue. It is not a Republican issue. It is an everybody issue. Red and blue make purple. There's people that are very pro removing books, and actually one of their leaders said in a public comment, stop with the semantics. Yes, we want to ban books. We are banning books. And they wear all white. So if you can show up and you can't wear purple, please just don't wear white. Unless you are pro book banning, I guess that's what you want, but I'm assuming no one here would be pro that. So if you can show up on the 17th, if you can show up to any of our school board meetings, if you can email them, let them know that it is not okay to censor materials. The Supreme Court tried for decades to define the word obscene as to what the government can and cannot censor, because they do agree that obscenity is something that maybe a little kid shouldn't be exposed to, which is cool. They couldn't define it though, because everyone's values are so different. So they came up with the Miller test, and the Miller test has 3 prongs. You have to meet all 3 prongs. 2 of the 3 prongs say you must take the work as a whole. So if they do anything less than the Miller test to determine obscenity and remove the materials, they are breaking the law. People here don't seem to care. Our state has redefined obscenity to say any mention of sex or gender identity. One of the books from our school got removed over 1 word. The book included the word masturbation. It did not describe masturbation. It did not occur. It just had the word in it. When they referenced that, that book got pulled. It is censored as obscene or sexually explicit over 1 word. They are not following the Miller test, and that's my big thing. It's like, here are the rules of what you can and can't censor. They're censoring it anyways. Now, we're not telling anyone what books have to be in our libraries, but we are saying if a librarian has put that book in the collection, the librarians are highly educated, they're experienced, they understand what their community needs and how to meet their community's needs. So we support the librarians. If the librarian says our collection doesn't need this book, our community doesn't need it, fine, we're cool with that. But when the librarians give their reviews to the school board and says, we think our community needs this book should be retained at the high school level, and our board goes, nope, there's a word in there we don't like, it's banned. Okay, sorry.
So, and I mean, let's talk about that. So, librarians, as far as you guys have taught me, librarians have a master's degree level class that they have that they have to curate a curriculum based on age. And so just recently, let's talk about what they did to the librarians in November. I really think that people ought to know what they did with asking them to review books that they've already reviewed. So who wants to talk about that?
You haven't talked yet, Frank.
Oh, well, you know the details, Carrie. I'll speak, okay. All right.
You're a librarian.
So let's talk about that, talk
Sure.
about what they did and what the reaction and fallout was.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Frank Lambert. I'm an associate professor of library and information science, and I work in the Masters of Library Science program at MTSU. For a while there too, I was also the program's director. So what happened in November, I'm trying to recall all the details now. They
asked them to review.
Oh, yes. There was a list of 190 books that one board member wanted to have pulled immediately. Oh, 150, I beg your pardon, thank you.
The others were 10 at a time.
10 at a time, yeah, that's right. And so what they decided to do is say, well, why don't we just have the librarians re-review them all and give us the reports. Now, 150 books times, what, how many high schools are there roughly? About 10 high schools, and I mean, that's a lot of work. So they came up with a plan of, okay, well then we'll pay them a little stipend or something like that for them to take the time to review them, write up a short report and submit it to the board. Well, after the librarians received that pittance of a stipend,
Tell them how much it was. Like $1,000?
it was $1,000.
It was $1,000 and, okay.
Yep.
On average, to review a book, they assume it takes about 8 hours to read the book, compare it with the law, get your expert opinions, whatever, and put together a review. You figure about 8 hours per book. 8 hours times 190 books, which it was 160 or 150 from one board member, but there was another board member that would submit 10 books constantly. So they say, okay, we'll put all these 190 books together for you to review. 8 hours times 190, and you're not allowed to do it during work hours. This has to be in your own time outside of your full-time job as a school librarian. We'll pay you $1,000. Do the math. That works out to next to nothing per book or per hour when you do that math. And so the librarians, though, being as dedicated as librarians are, and their passion for books and giving information to children, they did it anyways, and they gave very thorough reviews of each and every book.
I read every single one.
They submitted it to the board, and the board basically just like, yeah, whatever. Unless the librarian said, our school doesn't need this book, they disagreed with the librarians. And our board members did not read the books. And one board member has said proudly, who reads them? I haven't read a single, none of these books were in school when I was in school. I haven't read any of them, and I think we should just ban them all.
And he's 80-something years old.
Yeah, so that's what it boils down to. They just totally disregarded.
The did you turn this on? I think Carrie turned it off. See, even my wife censors me. The implications behind this are really serious. Basically, these...
See, you turned it off yourself.
I will use my loud voice. Basically, these people...
Don't hit that button.
I did, oh, I swear I didn't after. These people are affecting your livelihoods. this is a first,
I think the battery's dying, I'm sorry. Just
Just
speak real
project.
loud.
this is a true First Amendment issue. You do not have a First Amendment protection if somebody is taking away the words that have been put out there for you to read in the first place. So you go through all this effort to create these books, find a publisher, get it published, go on tours, attend a conference like this. Yet, if you try and get your book into a library or a library system, there are people saying, no thanks. It has a nasty word in it. Or it follows a particular viewpoint that we don't necessarily agree with. And that is not acceptable. And librarians, we are really in the front line with First Amendment protection as much as reporters are.
And I just have to add to that, it is not just libraries. You have to understand the motivation with these laws and what they're talking about. And they keep amending them and they'll change them. At one point, they wanted to go after the libraries at universities. But they are also talking about charging publishers, book distributors, authors, if they have material that these people don't like. So it is not just libraries. I mean, our focus is obviously libraries, and that's where the fight is at this moment. But it is not, they want to restrict access to information for the people of Tennessee, period.
I want to say, so I've been a school librarian for 12 years, and I've been was at a public library before that, so 20 years total experience. And one thing that I think people don't understand in this conversation is, you know, I'm tasked with purchasing, you know, hundreds of books a year. And as you all know, book reviews don't often have content, like, you know, it's just a summary of what's going on in the book. If I'm reading reviews that are written for children's books or young adult books, occasionally they will say things like, this is a title that's best for older students. This is a title that's best for the older high schoolers. But it doesn't necessarily say the kind of content that might be in the book. So I'm sort of purchasing books blindly in some ways. Of course, I do love to read. I am aware of what's published, and so sometimes I know, like, okay, this is gonna be too much for high school. I'm not gonna purchase this for I work in a high school. I'm not gonna purchase this, or in my community, the standards in my community, this is not a book that they would want, or, you know, and that is something I take into account. But I think that the conversation has become that librarians, you know, don't care about the content, don't care about what the kids are ready to read, and that's not true at all. I think the solution to this problem is not removing hundreds of books. That's like taking a sledgehammer to a problem. Taking like a scalpel to the problem would be that parents who have the absolute right to call me at any time and say, I don't want my child to have access to this author, this genre, these kinds of books. They could have those conversations with me any day, anytime, because it's their child. Their child is still a minor. I am there to make sure that the child doesn't read something that is too much for them. At high school level, the child already knows that usually about themselves, right? So they'll come and ask me for books, and they'll say, I don't want to read anything in this genre, or I don't want anything on this subject. That's perfect. We'll find something else. There's 15,000 books in my library, so there's something for everyone there. But instead of allowing parents to help their children make the decisions individually, this board in Rutherford County decide, we, the elected board, we're gonna decide for everybody in Rutherford County what we think is appropriate. And they are extremely conservative in their views, and so they don't think much is appropriate for students. But there are parents and students out there that want to read books on different subjects. And we're also now in the business of getting rid of books that show up on the AP test. So we got kids who are taking AP literature, and they can't check out Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. They just banned that on Thursday. They can't check out Toni Morrison's books and others that I could mention.
You can buy them in my shop though.
You can buy them at, in Lindsay's shop, and you can buy them in other places.
Every time they ban a book, it just gives me a shopping list.
But that goes back
But that's
to
for now.
an issue
Right.
of access,
Yes.
because just just because the book is available for purchase at the community doesn't mean the student has access to it.
Yeah.
And I went down into the Capitol and spoke to Representative Sparks, who represents Smyrna, and talked to him about the ban. He's like, well, can't they go to the public library?
No.
Yes, however, the Rutherford County Library System decided that if you're under 18 or under, your parent has to come in and sign something, physically come into the branch and sign something saying you're allowed to check out books. So we know that that's not gonna happen for every student. So if I can't get the book at my school library, I can't get the book at my public library, I don't have the money or the transportation to get to a bookstore, what are my options?
Right.
I can
And
download
I'll
it
give them away
illegally.
for free. It doesn't money,
Right.
Because you had said that, you and I
Right.
talked. Money will not be in it. If you need it, I will give it to you.
So we're only making things worse for students.
Sure.
Because they won't have access to the information, they need to be successful, and why do these people elected to the school board get to tell us what to think about? That's my question. It's like,
They're
do we have
taking away
freedom of
parental
thought?
choice.
Do we all have freedom of thought or not? Do we have freedom of speech or not?
Well, and I think something too that's misunderstood is the message in Rutherford County, I've noticed, it's happening in other counties too, but the message being put out is that these books are being given to 7 and 8-year-olds at school. They're being, exposed to pornography and obscene books. These are almost exclusively high school level books. You don't have kindergartners checking out Catch-22. You don't have first graders checking out Beloved by Toni Morrison. These are in the high school. There's a small amount that have been in middle school, but what we're seeing too is even if the board is not just outright banning books, like certain board members have said, I think we should just ban them all, and has made a motion to attempt that, over 100 books, just ban them.
Without reading them.
Without reading them, without reviewing them, without knowing the names of them or the content in them. So many of the books, the ones that they are keeping, are predominantly being restricted to 11th and 12th grade only with prior parental permission. They are being kept hidden in the library. The kids can't even look at them or touch the books without parents giving permission ahead of time. So to say, I don't even know one of the ones off the top of my head that they've kept but are restricted.
They did it with quite a few
There's a
of them,
handful.
but
Yeah.
their reasoning was in grade 11 and 12, students are 18 and 19 years old. I don't know how, but apparently grade 11 is when they think all the students are 18 and they're technically adults, and that's why they're allowing them to keep them for that age with the parental permission. But that's restricting parental choice, because in our district as well as the one you work in, parents have always had the option to talk to the librarian and restrict access for their own children.
I want to talk about the school board meetings too, because there's hearing about it and then actively going and watching what is actually happening at the school board meetings. So talk to me about you guys and your feelings about the school board meetings.
It's entertaining, it's theatrical.
That's true.
Political theater at its finest or worse.
I mean, Dr. Lambert here, he's wearing a shirt talking about he's one of the banished. That's because one of,
This shirt.
so the majority of the white shirts that we encounter, that's what we call them, is the white shirts. It looks like a Klan rally often, there's so many white people in white. But during one in particular, anyone who was against banning books outright were demons. We were banished from the community, never allowed to enter again.
They actually held a ceremony.
So I contacted someone that we had recently met with, Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. They've got a branch in Nashville, and they donated us several $100s to print over 50 t-shirts to hand them out for free. So that's one of our limited edition t-shirts because it's just so ridiculous and theatrical and over the top. You've got to make merch off of it, right? I mean, it was free merch, but still, it's just ridiculous. But
it's very theatrical, but it's also, you know, you get a crowd of over 100 and they're worked up, angry. A lot of them are Christian nationalists.
Talk about some of the names we've been called, because I think they're hilarious, and Carrie and I have some of our favorites.
I guess we are demons from a rainbow sex cult. That's, I think, the funniest thing.
Rainbow Sex Cult is an awesome band name too. I mean, I'm not musical, but if I was, that would be our band name.
But I think with the name calling, they are calling us grooming pedophiles. And that is their feeling about librarians. They think that people become librarians so that because they are pedophiles that want to groom their children to have sex with them or change their gender or whatever it is. And we're sort of making light of it now. If you are in that room and you have a large, angry man screaming during his public comment, who turns around and stares you down, screaming at you, calling you names. You call me extreme, I call you extreme. You're grooming pedophiles. And then when they exit the room, they don't leave the property. They go into the foyer and stare at you through a window, to the point that the people who aren't part of the white shirts are afraid to walk back to their own car. Authors United has reached out how they can help in that, and they're talking about authors coming to our school board meetings, and the representative said, oh, is there any chance that they would be called a name or harassed or anything? I said, oh, I can guarantee that will happen. And their jaw was on the floor, like, well, we can't send authors there because it's not safe. And it's like, well, I have to be honest. Like, if you're in that room, it's one thing to watch it on video. When you're in that room and you feel that energy, these are some very angry people who are trying to intimidate and threaten our librarians, who are trying to help our children and protect our children by giving them the information they need to make smart choices in their lives.
Well, I mean, keep in mind too, after the first day that I spoke, there was a meeting that was held and the comment was made, we have to do something about the little bookshop. And then I had somebody come into the store that I had to threaten to tase until they left. So, I mean, it's not just a group of people wanting to disagree about books. It has become a physically threatening body of people.
They've actually referred to it as a war. This is a war against good and evil. We are the good. We need to eliminate the evil. And again, that just sounds not that bad, but they really believe this is a war. They want a war. I don't want to fight.
I would like to say that we all know that we live in the Bible Belt. All of us in the room are probably familiar with, you know, one denomination or another. I grew up in a certain one that I won't mention right now. And faith is very important to people in this community. And that is absolutely fine, because obviously we have freedom to practice whatever religion we want. We have freedom to practice no religion. The issue has become that elected officials use their personal faith to make decisions about things that affect people that don't necessarily share the same views, right? Rutherford County is obviously a majority Christian, but there are people in this community that practice lots of other religions or practice no religion at all. And my expectation for my elected officials is that they will make decisions based on what's best for everybody and not make decisions based on their own faith. I understand, like, their faith is gonna, you know, inform what they're thinking, and that's fine, but they don't need to be invoking it while they're sitting in their position, in my opinion, okay? And another thing I wanna say is that when we're in those school board meetings, it can be very tense, and the people wearing the shirts are from a certain group, and they've been asked and organized to be there to counteract what we're saying, right? But I try to think of them as people that truly believe that they are doing something good, they are trying to be helpful. Just as we think that, we are also thinking, we're here to make a difference, we're here to help. And we aren't getting anywhere in our whole society, not just Rutherford County, by staying polarized. And so my hope is that we can talk to people one-on-one and say, you know what? It's false to label books in the library for kids as pornography, and it's dangerous when you do that, because now you're saying the school librarians want to expose children to pornography, which is absolutely false. It's just demonstrably false.
Although, my school, those kids, if somebody says this book is pornographic, you watch them line up to read it.
That's not true, actually. I work in a high school, and the students often don't want anything to do with like controversial things. They're scared, they've been scared. And when I tell them, like we had to remove some books from my library, and a couple of kids already had them checked out. So I had to call them down to the library and say, I'm really sorry, but the board decided that this book's not allowed in the library anymore. And both of them looked very upset and almost ashamed, which broke my heart, because they were taking it as they had done something wrong by wanting to read that book or wanting to check out that book. And that's the other part of this that I hate, is that the anti-library sentiment, the anti-literature sentiment, the anti-education sentiment is pervasive, because you're making people scared to want to read, you're making people scared to seek education, seek higher learning. It's all, that's the part to me that's very sad.
Does anybody have any questions for our panel?
Can I add just one thing?
Yeah,
please?
absolutely.
As a library and information science educator, like I'm the guy who trains and teaches students to become librarians. I can assure everyone here that we do not teach our student librarians to develop collections related to pornography. They build their collections based on their community. And one of the things we always go back to is do a community needs assessment. Who is your community? Know your community. You build your collection based on that community. Now, if a community, maybe a community that's a little bit out of the way, for whatever reason, they have a hankering for a whole bunch of Playboy, and they go to the library and say, we really like Playboy. It's like, okay, well, maybe we can buy a couple of issues, see what happens, and if everything works out fine, and there isn't all of this pushback, then we'll continue building that collection. However, if the whole community is up in arms and it causes, then we have to reassess our community's needs. So, it's not rocket science, but it's common sense.
That would never be in a K-12 library.
No, absolutely not. No,
He's talking
absolutely.
about public libraries.
Yeah, especially. Well, even I worked at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, and their special collections had a huge collection of pornographic magazines. And as part of my job, I had the great pleasure of cataloging them. And I later found out it was a bit of a joke. Some of the ladies in the cataloging department specifically reserved those magazines for me to catalog because I'm a guy, and they thought, we'll see how red his face turns. Didn't turn that red, but anyway. But again, it's all based on a needs assessment. They also had basically the largest collection of Bertrand Russell's writings and papers and everything as well. So they also had a huge philosopher and his materials there as well in that same special collections department. So again, please be assured that we are not in any way, shape, or form encouraging our students to become professional librarians after earning 36 credit hours of work. That they are not being taught to build collections related to pornography.
Scott, you had a question?
Sure, for Carrie. I learned something that you taught me, that like the book Speak, which I believe is about a rape victim.
Assault.
Yeah.
And I will let that book stay, but it's one of the ones that you were mentioning, you can't see it, your parents have to give permission, and you have to see it in the catalog, and I think you taught me that's illegal, they can't do that, but
Yeah.
tell me about that.
Well, part of the issue, if you look through the legal cases, anytime you take a book from its regular place on the shelf, and librarians have a system on what book goes where and how they keep them. If you remove that book from, say, a lower shelf and put it on a top shelf, or you put it behind a counter or whatever, that is unconstitutional. There have been several law cases about that, and they're basing that from the Denver versus FCC, and that was about TV, about you automatically didn't get access to certain channels if they showed things that were inappropriate, and the Supreme Court ruled, no, you can't do that. You can't have that be an opt-in program, it has to be an opt-out. So when they were talking about the graduated library cards at our public library, not only can a 16-year-old not access, sexually explicit material, a 16-year-old can't access an ACT study guide or an SAT study guide that would be in the reference or nonfiction portion of the library. What they have done is said, if you are 12 and under, or maybe it's under 12, you can only have access to this children's department. If you are 12 to 17, you only have access to the children's department and the teen department. But we're restricting access to everything else in the library. So all of your reference in nonfiction, you want to send your 15-year-old to the library and do a paper on George Washington, they can't get the reference material they need unless their parent physically comes in and signs a form. And so with the school libraries pulling them behind the desk, that's very much like the Wichita Falls, Texas case, which in the ruling, they said that any barrier created to accessing this information goes against the First Amendment. It's taking away their rights. It has to be in its normal place so that people have the option to browse. And that if a parent wants to restrict what their child reads, it is the parent's responsibility to go with their child to the library or talk to the librarian and restrict their own child, but no parent has the right to make a decision about what another parent's child can access. And that's where my issue is. Here's the law, let's follow the law. We've looked at that, I've spoken with the lawyers, we think maybe you're right, but sue me. And they have no intention of following these laws. They do not care about the First Amendment unless it's their First Amendment right to say what they want or to access the materials they want. So things need to be, parents and students need to be able to go into a library and browse the shelves, because if they didn't know that book existed, they're not gonna ask for it. They find out it exists because they go browsing through the shelves and they see the book, and that's how they should have access. So all of these things, they're going, well, let's find this middle ground and compromise, and we'll put them in a locked room or under a counter or behind a counter, whatever. That is literally unconstitutional. The Supreme Court has ruled on that multiple times. So that's not a compromise. The compromise is you worry about your kid, you worry about what you check out, and let other people do their thing.
The state of Tennessee has changed the state laws to, so it used to be that, like, if a material had violence or sexual content or something of that nature, you had to consider it as a whole. So a book like Catch-22 or Beloved has violence or sexual content, but it's a literary masterpiece or a classic work or whatever it is. It has educational value. Well, the law currently cut that part off. So the part about taking the work as the whole is gone in the state of Tennessee. So that is why you're seeing this capability of boards to just remove books just for any kind of mention of certain things. And I was sitting on a group talking with a state senator from Middle Tennessee, and they were asking him, well, how do we stop the librarians from purchasing the obscene books that are coming in? And he said, well, we may have to look at finding publishers who mail books across Tennessee state lines that end up in school libraries. So they think they can take aim at publishers, and I guess authors would be next, I don't know. But that's kind of how they think. They're never really concerned about what does federal law say or what does the Constitution say. They just want to create things in a way that works for them, and then yes, eventually maybe they'll be sued and maybe they'll have to change it, but in the meantime, all of this chaos happens in the meantime, so.
And it took
Anybody
the
have any
Supreme Court.
questions? Go ahead, yeah, no, if you have a question, raise your hand.
Yeah, I love what you said about, because it's true, I mean, they think they're doing the right thing, just as we're fighting to do the right thing. So if you are, say you're someone who is speaking to a board, or if you're someone like Lindsay and somebody comes into your shop and berates you, or if you're just talking to someone and they're coming at you with all of these just false things or ignorant things to say, what's either like kind of a go-to factual phrase or statement that you would say to them to try to bring them to your level and make them see from your side? I do understand that there are some people that you really just can't reason with because they're just not going to listen. But if there's something that can give a hope that maybe just a tiny tick can be planted, a tiny little seed of maybe I should think about this, what would your advice to that be?
I tend to go to patriotism. That's my go-to, is that we are the United States. The only thing that unites these states together into one country is the Constitution. And we need to follow the Constitution and talk about your patriotism and try to explain the actual harm. Like, we understand they want to protect minors. We want to protect minors too. And if you look at what actually causes actual real harm to the youth of our country, it is restricting access to information that causes harm. And you can look that up with your teen pregnancy rates in Rutherford County are through the roof. Our teen STD rate is through the roof. And when I mean through the roof, I mean like countrywide, we're like in the top 10, yay, Rutherford County. And the state has actually approached these issues and come to Rutherford County and said, I can quote it to make sure I get this right, comprehensive sex education classes that include both encouragement of abstinence and information on birth control have been shown to reduce the number of teen pregnancies. So they'd say you have to start doing this because your children between 15 and 17, the STD rates, I believe outside of Memphis, the rate of HIV and gonorrhea, I might have the wrong STDs, but they went up like 200% since they started restricting access to information. Like, I am talking, this is actual harm. So I think we need to let them know that, one, you're patriotic and you believe in this country, and two, you want to keep children safe and show them the numbers, show them the harm that is actually coming to our children because of this lack of information.
I will also add, there is some research in literacy. Two researchers whose names elude me at this point. They interviewed 400 school-age children and asked them questions related to their, how they felt about difficult books. Toni Morrison's Beloved might be considered a difficult book because there are some passages in there that are not nice, but that was life, right? The harm or how these children felt about it, they actually feel empowered reading about this and knowing about how people were treated, for example, pre-Civil War, during the Civil War, etc. And it's actually a benefit to them to read these difficult books. It's better for them to learn about it in a book so that they can recognize the signs of these injustices or these harms that could occur to them or their friends or siblings. It's better for them to learn it now than rather to be completely ignorant of it as an issue and then suddenly have to face it in real life.
Carrie brought up a good point when I first started with you guys about how, and you may have already talked about it, but how sometimes these books help people who have things happen to them but don't have the words for it.
Yeah.
And you were telling me about a case, but I can't remember what it was, about a case with a little girl who was at the...
What happened was a child checked a book out of the library, went home and read it, came out of her room and said to her mother, "Oh, this is me." And it was about a child that was being assaulted by their father. And the mother reacted appropriately, and her child was safe. They were able to actually prosecute her abuser, but she never would have known that was going on had her child not checked out that book. Like, and that's something I've said at school board meetings, is as much as we don't want to admit it, this world can be really cruel. A lot of bad things happen in the real world. And as educators, don't you want your students leaving and knowing how to protect themselves? Because as much as we hate to admit it, there are children right now in our school district who have been, who will be, or who currently are being abused. And they might be afraid to speak up. They might not have the language for it. They might think they're the only person this is happening to because we're not talking about it enough. And when they find out there's other people, and they find that other people have survived this, how they were able to cope with it, oh, I'm not alone, that can make a huge, huge difference in their lives, being able to stand up for themselves and maybe not commit suicide. Because suicide rates are very high on underrepresented populations.
And two, when you get up and you see adults yelling or angry or disgusted by books that cover topics like sexual assault, childhood sexual assault, to say that those books are disgusting is a slap in the face to the survivors and the current victims that are going through that. To say that a child to say that a book that has that and then teaches about how to report how that's wrong, the message though that you're giving, that's disgusting, we don't need that. There's children right now in our school system, in our county, unfortunately being sexually assaulted and abused. And to say that that experience is disgusting and to shame, it shames the victim, and it raises the likelihood that they will never report or won't report for decades, because how many childhood sexual assault victims don't report until decades later, and then you can't prosecute. You hope that by then they've gotten healing, but we hear regularly on both sides of the issue from survivors of sexual assaults, and it's difficult to hear those stories. I mean, there's not details given, but you still see the pain from people that experienced it decades ago. And you wonder, you know, if they had gotten help and had, you know, received therapy and just help, and that person had been prosecuted decades ago, would they still be in the current level of pain that they're in right now? Because it's very evident, and it's hard to sit there. I don't care if you're screaming at me that a book is pornographic, and you know that because you went through that. I'm still empathetic enough, and just, you know, I have eyes and ears. I can see the pain that you're in. And it's so frustrating, just the shaming that goes on in those meetings. But it's also, I do want to piggyback off of something that was said earlier. You know, there's lots of things that are said about people that are speaking out and wanting books to be removed from our schools or public libraries. You know, there's things that are said about against them, and there's things that are said against us, and it's very evident that there are messages on both sides being said with how people are treating each other in these public meetings. The simple act of me holding a door open for a woman in her 60s or 70s that's in a white shirt while I'm in my purple shirt. I have had women in their 60s and 70s act fearfully of me because I'm holding a door open for them to allow them to go into the meeting ahead of me. So what is the messaging that's going on behind that? Why are you afraid of me, a middle-aged mom, you know, in a purple t-shirt? Why are you scared of me? What's behind that? And you know, and that's on both sides of it. But it's very telling of how polarized we are, and the work that's being done to keep us polarized. When at the end of the day, we both want kids to be safe. I think that's one thing that we can agree on. We want kids to be safe. And if a book is not right for your kid, that's perfectly fine. That's your right as a parent to make that decision. You should be involved in what they're reading. But that book might be appropriate for my kid or Carrie's kid. I don't know.
Does anybody have any questions? Anybody? Okay, so what are some of the titles that are being removed, just out of curiosity, that have shocked you the most?
Catch-22. That's, I think, the most shocking. Not in Rutherford County, but, I mean, they're banning Dr. Seuss. Is it Williamson or Wilson? I'm sorry, one of the buildings. Wilson County, Pinkalicious books, and Dr. Seuss.
Wait, Dr. Seuss, really?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm not joking. Like, that's what we were
Yes.
trying to say. The books that our librarians are picking out are not pornography. They are not obscene.
I feel like
Danny,
Dr.
you got a
Seuss serves the
question?
world in such a profound way, so
I'm
that's
kind of
pretty
curious,
strange.
what are they claiming about Dr. Seuss for,
You know what,
like,
I
wanting
don't
to get it banned?
remember, because it wasn't our county, so I didn't look as much into it. It was Wilson County, but it was on the list, and my mind just, I'm not sure. I know that the Lorax is what, because it's about the environmental.
They claim it's left-wing propaganda.
Yeah, but it was another,
Stewardship is.
it wasn't the
Right,
Lorax
right, right.
specifically in
Not
Wilson
enforcing
County. I forget which one it was. I
laws.
think my husband's Googling.
Yes, I am.
He's Googling and he'll find out why, but yeah. But Pinkalicious and Dr. Seuss.
Wacky Wednesday,
Wacky Wednesday.
that was one
Why?
of the Dr. Seuss. I'm coming to that.
Somebody doesn't like it. I don't know.
Hurry up.
It's pornography. Wacky Wednesday is apparently obscene or pornography.
Well, and while he's looking that up, what we do know from our school board members is they're going off of a Moms for Liberty associated website to target based on their rating system.
Talk about that Moms for Liberty group.
So it's either like a rating of 1 to 5, 5 being ban it now, burn it outside. Not really, but not burn it, but I don't even want to say the website name. But
They're
they
trying
just,
to create
they take,
content warnings. for
Mhm,
the-
that's exactly what it is. It's content warnings.
And they named it something so it sounds like it's coming from the school board when it's not.
Right, we have a knockoff version of a Moms for Liberty, so a knockoff of a fangirl website of Moms for Liberty.
Fanfic website.
Fanfic, yes. We have a local version of it that has copied it. But it's a rating system of 1 to 5. We know that they've started with the top ones in Rutherford County. We had one board member in particular who was targeting those and would turn in 10 books at a time until we got the list of 150 all at once that was mentioned earlier by a different board member.
Something interesting to note about the list of 150 books was obviously copy and pasted from some other state, some other district, because there were at least 10 titles on the list that Rutherford County Schools didn't even own in the first place. But the person making the list didn't bother to actually go through, look through the catalogs, look through the library and see. They just thought, okay, we're gonna copy and paste this and this is it. So this is really a nationwide thing that's going on, and you're asking like, what books are you surprised? I'm not surprised anymore at anything I see on any of the lists, because
Well,
they can come up with
mine
any
too.
reason they want to get rid of
I went
something.
through the list when you and I were talking about it, and Carrie and I were talking about it. There are several duplicates on the list, so when they copied and pasted, they didn't even look at it. So they would have stuff like, these such and such, and then the same title without the "the" in front of it. So, it tells me that they didn't even look at what they were putting
And
the
a lot of
list
the
together on.
censorship laws that are going through the different states are coming out of think tanks. So you'll see an you'll see a censorship bill in Texas, Florida, Iowa, and then a very similar bill will be introduced in Tennessee. And they're sort of all, working, like, they're influencing each other basically on what laws to try to pass.
I have a quick comment, just from the outside. I feel like society, like in any political conversation, there's always these small groups that have a very loud voice, and then there's a lot of people who kind of don't know where they land, and they're kind of, they could go either way. They're like, I just need more information. I feel like the general public has a sense that like kids are not okay right now, and they don't know why. And it feels like this books thing is like a convenient scapegoat where politicians can take some action that appears to do anything at all, but they're identifying these books as the problem when, like, you know, kids have the internet and they're watching the news and they're taking on the entire world every morning as if that's a healthy thing for children. They have the history of the world at their fingertips, but yet these books, and there is some sense from the outside that it's not just that these books are available, but they're being pushed on kids. And I'm not sure, I mean, clearly there's some central group, you know, kind of pushing this narrative.
I think really at the root of it, it is to sow distrust in public education. I think that's really where it's coming from.
Like the big picture is like, hey, the school system itself is the problem.
Teachers are dangerous, the things they teach are dangerous, the librarians are pushing ideologies through books. And it speaks actually to the power of education and the power of literacy. They know how powerful it is, and they seek to limit the influence. I mean, I think that's why you see the efforts that have been made lately to dismantle public education.
If I could throw one thing out there, and I know you, especially here on the end, you talked about bringing the temperature of the rhetoric down, and I do appreciate that, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. But a couple of years ago, I just started paying attention to all the news coverage that I was seeing of preachers and faith leaders being led away in handcuffs for sex crimes. And so I just on my own, no formal anything, just started kind of keeping up with it just here in the state of Tennessee. And last month, there were 5. In the shortest month of the year, 5 pastors in Tennessee were arrested for sex crimes. Now, I'm not saying to throw that in anybody's face, but sometimes you do need to bring out the brass knuckles. And I have ended several arguments about this stuff with just, okay, I'm gonna show you 5 preachers who've been arrested for sex crimes. Now you show me 5 drag queens. You show me 5 trans people. You show me 5 gay people. You show me 5 anybody you want to. So show me 5 librarians who have groomed children.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying at the school board, maybe that'd be a good time to bring it up, but if somebody's really in your face, it's kind of handy to have that. Say, well, here, there's the 5 who were arrested in February in Tennessee.
Yeah.
You know, and of course, no, not all pastors, whatever,
No,
but you're, you know, when you clean this up, then we can talk about libraries.
Well, I think too, off of that there's this assumption that we don't believe in God and that we don't go to church and that we're not people of faith. I believe in God. I have faith. I know that Tiffany does. I know that Angel, I know everybody has a firm belief in something that they believe in, you know, higher power, whatever you want to call it. So it's not a God, you know, God Christian people versus the not, that's not what that is, you know, and I think that that's a misunderstanding about all of this as well, is it's not religious versus non-religious. I mean, I know the Bible, I've grown up reading the Bible, I believe in a higher power, I have even thrown Bible verses back at people who've thrown them at me.
Well, we've read it.
Right, so, you know, I want to make sure that that understanding is out there too, is it's not an attack on religion, it's not an attack on non-religion.
And like I said, I wouldn't use it for every.
No.
When you got that one person who's really coming after you, sometimes, you know, you gotta stand up for yourself.
I mean, one of my favorite books is The Greatest Game Ever Played, and it's about a guy who has a heart attack on a golf course, and he plays 18 rounds with God, you know, trying to win the right to his life.
Right.
And it's a beautiful book on humanity and love and acceptance.
I guess my broader point is, if they were really concerned about the welfare of children, they wouldn't start with libraries.
Yeah, 100%.
And they would be more focused on social media, things that are, you know, kids are accessing.
So I think they maybe have decided the library is a good soft target.
It is, yeah.
And so maybe, again, it's easy for me to say, because I don't work in the library, but I'm not cut out for it, and it might be because I'm the one who would show them the preachers.
And I would like to add too, we do have some pastors in the Murfreesboro community who actually support us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
There
you
have been
know,
public comment from other faith leaders
Yes.
that are saying, no, you don't restrict access to these books, so.
let's not forget that freedom of religion and freedom of the press are both protected by the same First Amendment.
Yeah, I don't want anyone here thinking when we say that there is a church that has a group that fights to ban these books, we are not saying all churches, we are not saying all religious
Nope.
people. That is
Absolutely
not it. It is
And
one
that's definitely
very
the point I was trying to make.
specific
Yeah, sure.
group, one very specific group that is for banning books, and that is not, they do not, in my opinion anyways, they don't represent Christianity.
Well, and we've had people throw at you guys, I say we, cause I am part of your group. We've had people say, well, why don't you ban the Bible then? That's not what we're trying, we don't think the Bible should be banned.
No. And I have said
No.
that in
Numerous times.
many interviews. They're like, well, why don't you ban? And then there was a little movement
This is
within
not a
members.
tit for tat thing.
Yeah, there were a lot of members going, okay, this is it, we're gonna challenge the Bible, we're gonna challenge, and we had to put out a public statement saying, we don't tell other people what to do, you do you, but as part of RCLA, no, you do not challenge the Bible. That goes against everything we stand for. If the librarian has put the Bible in the library, then the Bible stays in the library. We're saying our librarians know our communities needs, and if they put a book in the library, that book needs to be in the library. And we will not, under any circumstances, challenge the Bible or encourage anyone to do that. No, they should have access to whatever information they want and need.
And when a book is challenged, which is everybody's right to challenge a book that's in our library system, when it is challenged and the librarians say, because it's always a thorough review, that they provide, whether they say to keep it or they suggest removing it, we support that, even if it removes the book.
Yes.
So,
We're almost out of time, because I know that we could do this all day, but we have one last question. Last question, and then we do, unfortunately, because, I mean, we can talk about it all day. Go ahead, Clarence.
One quick question, okay, let's say there is an author that has a book in there, and they just found out that they banned their book. What are the steps that they can do to help fight that?
You can contact the board and then contact a lawyer.
They have standing.
Yep.
Because
Yes.
their freedom of speech in that case was violated.
Well, I want to say thank you. Go ahead, Zoe, last question.
So I was on the LGBTQIA plus authors panel earlier today, and I've been to one of the school board meetings, the one where the man was ranting about the rainbow sex cult, and like I said, I did not feel particularly safe walking back to my car. And
I had to drive you back to your car. I remember having to do that.
I've seen that more and more within my own community. It's just that fear to show up for this fight, because we're the direct target, as if our day-to-day life is a threat to the American dream. So I just wanted to get your take and your advice on how people in my community can show up for this fight when there is that fear of they want to erase us from.
Don't go anywhere alone.
Yeah.
Safety in numbers.
Yeah.
Get a group together, or know that we're gonna be there too, connecting.
Well, or don't worry about it, because they're good Christians.
That's right.
We do have, sites on social media, we have a Facebook page, and, I know it's not the most popular social media, medium, but,
We have an
yeah.
email list as
Yeah,
well.
and email lists and things like that, but, anybody is happy to, more than welcome to look up the Rutherford County Library Alliance on Facebook and join the group. We also have a private group that we vet, people much more thoroughly. So we have a public and a private group.
And a members only group for
Yeah,
paid members, because
for
you can
payment,
always
yeah.
buy a membership. I'm
Yeah.
horrible at this, that reminded me, I'm supposed to sell.
Yeah.
You can donate to us, you
Yeah.
can get a membership and be an official member. We have members
Right.
only meetings, and that's.
But as well, the primary reason I'm bringing this up though is for communication purposes. And we try to share as much information as we can with our fellow members or with those individuals who aren't members, but kind of appreciate what we're doing and they want to support us. So please, I would encourage you to, you know, like our Facebook page, join it, whatever, and then just keep a little eye on it. You'll receive notifications, you know, if we're planning on making a big appearance at a specific meeting, that notification will be up there. And then the nice thing too is that after the meeting, the video will be posted as well. So even if you can't make it, you still can watch it and.
Spread this info among my community if there are
Yes.
people that feel particularly safe to be there in
Absolutely,
person.
absolutely. So
They're all public meetings.
yeah, and please bring members of your community with you as well.
We'll
Might bring
sit
it up
with
at the
you.
next Pride meeting.
I mean, I don't know if we're that scary, middle-aged women, you know, but we'll sit with you, we'll.
Yeah.
Here we are.
That's, but yeah, I mean, you will have a lot of support.
They always have at least 2 police officers at the school board
Yes,
meeting, so you
yeah.
can ask for an escort out to your vehicle after, or ask one of us, we escort you out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we have, you know, poor Lindsay's had to park far distances and we're more than happy to walk her out there and then go back, no
The
problem.
intimidation tactics that are used, what we have seen, it's either families with small children that the attempt is to physically intimidate. It's families with small children or it's women that are on their own. It's never another grown man on his own. It's not unusual to be escorted out to your car if you're feeling unsafe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we should give a round of applause. It's a hard topic, but one of the things I wanted to do with this panel was to show that it wasn't religion versus non-religion, readers versus non-readers. That's not what it's about. It's about the federal right to read or not to read. So thank you guys very much for talking. And they'll be wandering around. They have a table over here. So if you do have any questions and you do want to ask questions, they're table 22. Please go by and talk to them because they will be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you guys so much. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you guys, thank you.